Past players, past legends, past legends.
We welcome aboard Stephen John Raiden Patterson. Fair name, that, Patto. That's all we've got time for, yeah. So.
Very good, I know.
Yes.
Get all the little middle initials in there.
Yes, so Patto, 86 games for Nord, 116 goals, 96 games for Collingwood, so not quite the 100 for either club, 88 goals. Nord best and fairest in 93, Advertiser Team of the Year in 93, state game, played a state game, third in a BNF in the Copeland at Collingwood as well. Welcome aboard, Patto.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you for joining us, mate. Like we do with most of our guests, we like to find out where your footy career started and when.
Yeah, sure. I suppose my first team I played for was under 12s at Hope Valley, and it's a bit of a story there because I was at Highbury Primary School, and they didn't have a footy team, so everyone played at the Hope Valley, and I was sort of in my year, I was the lower age group. So I was actually in under 11, and I actually tried to go out and play with my mates the year before, and so in under 11s, and I went out there and told them my age, and so they said, no, you've got to play in the age group below. So I didn't end up playing that year, and then the next year I came out and ended up lying about my age so that I could play with my mates in under 12s.
Seems to be a common theme with some of our guests.
Yeah, we've already had Tim Weather on, because Weathers, you had to be 8, and so he wandered down, and Mick had told him, you're to say you're 8. So he got there, how old are you? And Weathers answered, Dad told me to tell you I was 8. Weathers was 4. So fair effort. That.
I wasn't that young, but certainly I was pretty small though. I was only a little rover, so I was a bit small. But that didn't worry me. And
you were just there for just the 1 year?
Yes, I was really only at Hope Valley for a year, and then just went off, played. Well, my dad went over to England for work, so ended up playing soccer as well, and then came back and played school footy. Really, I didn't play at Pembroke, and then just played school footy at Pembroke until I finished school.
Who was coaching out at Pembroke at that time?
Oh, great question. Dennis Borden. He's a famous Pembroke.
Yeah, and he was at Nord High. He taught me at Nord High before he went to Pembroke, Patto.
Oh, there you go. Well, Malcolm knows everyone out Adelaide, so I'm not surprised he'd know Dennis. No one else would. But he was really good because he really encouraged me. And then we had our first 18 coach. He was third player. I think it was Howard, his name was. And we also had Jim Darrington at the school at the time.
Mike Howard. Yep.
Mike Howard, that's it. And so Mike Howard coached us, and then Jim Darrington was still playing at Sturt at that stage. So I think he's the captain. And also, of course, we had Robert Odie was there.
Yep.
He never actually coached me, but he was around the traps.
And Jim, of course, has been long-standing at Pembroke for 30-odd years. So, because he went to Nord High as well. So he actually would have he would have been a student under Dennis Borden as well. The whole irony of Adelaide, we all know each other somehow, don't we? So,
yes.
So from Pembroke out to Nord from there, Patto?
Yeah, I did. So of course, I hadn't been brought up through the under-A system, and then Dennis Borden and they said, well, you either go out to Sturt or Norwood. And so I was at uni, and I didn't really get, because I hadn't been doing pre-season before. I just rolled out to Norwood to the under 19s in January when they'd probably been training for a lot longer, and just sort of not invited myself out, but just sort of came out and played under 19s for Norwood for 2 years.
Smith, who was that? Phil, was that Smith? Trying to think of
for the coach.
Yeah,
I had Frank Leonard. So
Frank Leonard time. Yep.
So Staff was the under 17s coach, and then Frank Leonard, and they were basically they'd been coaching the whole. So this was back in the 80s, late 80s, but both of them had been effectively the junior coaches
for a while,
all that decade,
especially Staff. Yeah,
he was a very good coach.
And so then going through from the juniors, your league debut?
Yeah, so that was in 91. So basically,
Yep.
played in 89 and 90 in the 19s. And we had some really good players there.
Yep.
And this is before, of course, before the Crows were in.
Yep.
And probably before the draft was anything like it is now. Like back then, they would draft, a Magarey medalist, and they would only look at players that played league.
Yeah.
So your whole aim was to go through the ranks with your mates and play league for the club. And so there wasn't that focus that there is on now on the juniors. But the juniors teams at Norwood were very good because of the coaches and that. And so we had some really good players, of course, playing there. And then so the year I got into the seniors, that was the year the Crows came in. So there was quite a few players retired or went off into the Crows system.
Yep.
And then Neil Craig came from North, and he was the coach.
Yep.
Who were some of those underage juniors that you played with? I know I'm probably asking a big question to remember, but who were some of those players that you got to play with in your juniors?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to. I had Scott Robinson, so he was a very good player, and then there was other players who, like there was a guy called Chris Lang, who was an amazing player. He could literally stand on people's shoulders. Like these days, they would have said, "Oh, we'll draft him." But he ended up playing juniors, and the another guy, Kingy, was excellent from Conniva. So there was lots of players that probably didn't go on and become household names, but they were really really good players.
And
Who else? We of course we had. I mean, in terms of players that went on, Martin Pike came through. He was sort of a year below me, and in the juniors, but he went through, and then we also had Malloy as well. He went over to Melbourne.
Glenn Malloy.
Yeah.
And of course, Scotty Burns, you actually started at Collingwood with Scott, but was Burnsy, he was after you with juniors?
Yeah. He was a bit younger, so I mean, he was just a very good player, of course. So he basically, I was playing league by the time he came through. And then Brett James, who was another one I went over to Collingwood with, he was an outstanding junior. So he was already playing league he went straight out of 17s into league, which at that stage there was not too many players that had done that. I think Greg Turnbull was one.
Yes.
Brett James was one of the others, and Macca as well.
Yep. Greg Turnbull was one of the his knees were just terrible what he did, and he would have been one of the all-time VFL greats. He was incredible. When you get Foss Williams saying that he was the most courageous player he'd ever seen, that you don't get too much higher praise than that, Pato. So,
no, especially I'm not a Port Adelaide player, so definitely.
Sit up and take notice, don't you?
Yeah, so through 91, 90, 92, 93, certainly the highlight, Pato?
Yeah, it was great because it was coming through. So 91 was challenging because a lot of players, it was a real, I suppose, a changing of the guard.
Turnover,
because you had a number of factors. You had older players retiring. You had the really good players like Pittman and Matty Kelly. They went off. They were playing at the Crows, and then in my case, Stephen Rowe, who was a Rover, he was playing at the Crows, and so really had to Craigie had to basically rebuild the whole team based it around the juniors, and so it was a real eye opener, of course, because he was at that stage also coaching at Sassy.
Yep.
So he was surrounded by all these, really high performance cyclists, and he was really very cutting edge with his sports science. So he trained us really hard. I remember my first training session out of the league. It was a bit of an eye opener. Yeah. We had to do a massive 10K run, and it was my first time out at training with the seniors, and we basically had to run 10Ks, and you weren't allowed to be caught by the trainer, like the fitness guy. So we sort of left in groups, and the fitness trainer was left after us, and he wasn't allowed to catch you up. Otherwise, you had to do penalties. I just remember running around the River Torrens, pretty much delirious.
That was out
to get run down.
That was out at Langman Grove, wasn't it? And you did the Torrens track from Langman Grove towards the city, if I remember rightly.
Yep. All running along there.
Yes.
And, going past the zoo, and
yep.
That's pretty tough work when you run past there when you're trying to breathe in oxygen and the air's not pure air when you run past the zoo.
You've seen plenty of players, unfortunately, lose their lunch after doing those runs because they were pretty tough.
Yeah, they were, definitely. Yeah, but so Craigie, I mean, it was really good. He taught me a lot about football, and really, he was really had a firm, he really tried to drive the culture as well. So not just about the skills, but driving the culture.
Yep.
And he, because I was quite slimly built even at that stage. I think before the '93 season, he got me and Michael Thompson and John O'Robin out to Sassy to do weights and really try to build our bodies up. And that really made a bit of a difference actually, because it just gave a bit more staying power around the ball, not get pushed off the ball and could run out games as well.
So in that first year, you debuted, was it against West Adelaide?
It was actually. It was a bit of I think Stephen Rowe got a late call up to the Crows or something like that. So it wasn't like I was, I only found out, I think the morning of actually, and Craigie might have known the day before, but just thought rather than make me all nervous and that, just let me know that the game before. And I must admit, maybe because he did that, I wasn't actually all that nervous. And we played a really good game, and it was a good introduction to playing league football actually. So I felt that I could actually belong. Of course, when you're watching from the grandstand, everything looks a lot more fast and clean skills, and then when you get out there, you realise that you can keep up with them, which is always good for the confidence. And
that was at the old footy park. Was that right?
It was, first came at the footy park. Yeah, it was great. So there was lots of space. So it was good for me running around. And that year, of course, I think West Adelaide, they went on to win to play in the grand final. But I think we were that was one of the last teams to beat them on their run, because they really got going.
Yeah, that's right.
And put together a lot of games in a row. And so I think obviously they got done by North in the grand final. But I think before that, we were the last team to beat them.
Yeah, the bloodbath. Yep.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was.
So 93, Pato, you had a really consistent year, showing you making the Advertiser Team of the Year, which is always a big thing in South Australian footy to make the Advertiser Team of the Year. And, of course, the prelim final against Port Adelaide was certainly the highlight of the year. We don't really want to talk about the grand final too much. We went to the bar pretty early, I admit, on that day.
I think most people did, mate.
Yes. But
but the prelim final was
great game.
Excellent. I remember that. That'd be one of my favourite games for Norwood, definitely. And just I think, especially after the game, I remember driving back to the club afterwards and seeing, as we drove through the city back to the parade, seeing everyone with their flags out, going down North Terrace, and it made you feel really good. It made so many people happy.
Yeah, grand final
but
didn't.
It didn't. No, I mean, and
what? They were just way too.
It was a 6-day break. I think we were the last team to play off a 6-day break, because after that they realised, well, you've got to at least give the prelim finalist winner 7 days off. Yeah. So I think we would, we were a young side, and in hindsight you can understand a little bit, because I think that that's the same year that Essendon had their baby Bombers, and we were quite similar. We had so many players under 21, and I suppose the game caught up with us a little bit.
I think training caught up with it. Craigie got carried away that week with how many numbers were at training. And because I can remember on the Thursday night thinking, for goodness sake, get him off the track. And that's the only time I've ever thought that watching it training. You always wanted to watch training, but we go, get him off. And Beefy said it didn't worry him as a young guy, with so many of the young guys, but a couple of the older guys said, it certainly ran them, heavy legs, which didn't help. But Woodville West Torrens played very well on grand final day. We've got to be fair. Wiedemann dominated.
Yep.
And that. So.
What was your best memory from the prelim against Port?
Well, I think certainly when we in the second quarter, the second quarter when we did a surge and sort of put ourselves a few goals up, I could just feel you could just feel the game turning, and that gave us a lot of confidence to go on. And then in the last quarter, if I could be a little bit selfish, I remember getting the ball in the old scoreboard pocket, so I was pretty close to the boundary, and ran on to the ball and then kicked the goal, and then the crowd went pretty pretty wild actually. Well, the Northern supporters did anyway. So yeah, that was great. And then you're sort of running around on air when you do those sort of things.
Yeah, I must admit, I might have watched that once or twice. That
the old YouTube replay.
Yes.
We might have to put that one up on our Facebook page, I reckon.
And so then from there, so when did Collingwood first show interest then, Pato? And were other sides interested as well?
Yeah, so back then, 91, 92 were only the Crows could draft South Australians, so it was that moratorium in a way. And then 93, when I played that good year, I had a few clubs interested, quite a few clubs, but Collingwood didn't actually speak to me.
Okay.
And they drafted me, and it was interesting back then because of course there's no, it wasn't live, like it didn't even have the internet calling out the picks, and so you didn't know what happened. So I mean the first I knew about it was, I think a journalist phoned me up to say I'd been drafted by Collingwood, and then Collingwood phoned up afterwards and just said they drafted me, and they said their modus operandi then, they didn't really talk to players because they didn't want to give away who they were interested in and who they weren't. They just picked players. So and I think that was the pick before the Crows. So, but that was, at that stage, Collingwood was a massive club, so it was very exciting to, I wanted to play for a club like Norwood where you've got a lot of history and, supporters were at that stage. The Crows were just, they're sort of very new into the competition. So, that would have been great to be at Adelaide as well. But it certainly didn't have any misgivings getting drafted to Collingwood.
Well, we talked with Roger James about how he found out that he was coming back to the Crows. A lot of people forget that we didn't have. To Port Adelaide. Thought he was going to the Port Adelaide. Ended up at the Crows. It's amazing that people don't understand that there wasn't a thing like internet and mobile phones around once upon a time, and you did find these out through the wires, really.
Well, that's on the old landline. So if you weren't home, so I was at uni at that stage. So you had to get contacted by the landline. So of course, so I got drafted, and then back then it's quite interesting. You'd think now, bit difficult looking back what goes on these days. But of course, back then AFL was semi-professional. The SANFL was obviously semi-professional, but there wasn't a massive difference between the competitions. And Craigie was he was obviously old school, and he'd been through probably the VFL days in the 80s where they went and they'd, like I said before, they'd pick players who played state and who were, best and fairest at their footy clubs. And, Craigie was saying, make sure if you go over there, because I was a bit older too, I wasn't 18, I was 22 when I got drafted. He said, when you go over there, you've got to make sure you're ready to play because they're not expecting to develop you. So you've got to, make sure that you play round one. And he said, you're better off staying here in SA and making sure you're cherry ripe when you go over. So like a few blokes, I ended up staying a year after I got drafted and played for Norwood again in 94.
Yep. And of course you were studying Bachelor of Science and Physics and Bachelor of Electrical and Electronic Engineering.
Yes. So lots of maths, lots of physics. Makes your head spin trying to understand it half the time.
Footy would have been a bit of a
so I was doing,
release.
Studying as well, and having to think about setting up a career. And like I said, the football wasn't the professional game that it is now. And so stayed for another year, and then went over in 95.
And go through your highlights over playing for Collingwood. Of course, you did one thing. We'll get to that a bit later, but you did one thing which I reckon every single person would like to have done in football: kick the first ever goal against Port Adelaide, Port Power.
That's a stat trivia man's
gold
class question.
You can store. You could use that, I reckon, forever, Pato. You should virtually go around, bugger your political crap. Go around with a badge. I kicked the first ever goal against Port Power. Yeah.
Yes. I know. I mean, it is pretty serendipitous because, of course, the Victorians probably don't get the rivalry between Norwood and Port. They obviously have and I don't get the rivalry as much between Collingwood Carlton and Collingwood Richmond.
Exactly.
That's gone on that's 100 years in the making. Obviously, I understand it, but it's over there. it's live and die, and it's the same over here. Norwood plays Port, and so it was great to be able to get the opportunity to play against Port in their first game. Yeah, and actually, to kick I ended up kicking the first 3 goals too. Malcolm against Port, which was great.
And let's have that badge even better. It's got to be a bigger badge, Pat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who did you debut against?
Yeah, so I debuted against Carlton, so round 1, and it's a massive ground, the MCG, of course. Like, it's a massive step up on Adelaide Oval. So instead of, I played in front of 40,000, 45,000 in that grand final between Norwood and the Eagles. That'd be the biggest crowd I played in beforehand. And then I've gone over to Collingwood and played round 1 against Carlton, and there was I think it was about 90,000 crowd. And I remember there was Brett James, Scott Burns, and myself. We were living together, and it was the first game. And Brett's played a year before, so he sort of knew about it. But one of the players, one of my teammates, Brad Rowe, he was a gardener, and he said, I'll pick you boys up so you don't get lost on the way, and I'll get you into the grounds because it's going to be a big game. So he's rolled up to pick us up for our first game, and it's literally in, I don't know, it'd be like in a high ace, but there was no seats in the back because he put all these pot plants in there. So the 3 of us went to our first game sitting in the back of a high ace, with bouncing around, no windows, and he's driven us in to the
like a grand final parade.
Oh, no, there was no roof. We were like totally in the back of a van. But it was actually good because it relaxed us because we weren't thinking about the game. We were thinking about not getting bashed around into the walls as we drove along, and joking around. So got to the game okay. I can't actually remember in the change rooms beforehand, but remember when we ran out onto the ground, we used to come out the Southern Stand. So the Great Southern Stand, which is now the Shane Warne Stand. The players' race used to be that side, and I remember just running out onto the ground. And of course, they play the Collingwood theme song and the banners up there, and their banners, of course, Collingwood are bigger than any other banner, and just the crowd was all roaring, and all the sound was going into the middle of the ground where we were running onto, and because it's a circle,
it's a coliseum.
It's like a coliseum, and just the sound is it's massive, really deafening, really, and just running out there and it's actually a little bit, you don't feel like it's an out of body experience, to be honest, running out there like that. And I remember doing the warm up, and you can't hear your teammates. That's we're playing in the SANFL, we're used to being able to hear all your teammates, whereas there you're basically about 20 metres away and you can't hear each other.
So go through some more highlights there, Pato. So you kicked 25 goals in 96. You also got 3 Brownlow votes against North Melbourne in 87, and you're probably a little bit unlucky in the following year. I don't reckon they had the Anzac Day medal at that stage because you got voted best on ground in that. And your 98 season, it's huge to finish third in a Copeland. It's
at Collingwood.
Yeah, at a Collingwood Copeland. So it's some big achievements there, mate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 98 was it was a good year for in terms of my playing. What we did though, I was playing mainly as a forward in the first few years, and then in 98 played in the midfield, but more playing on players as opposed to being attacking midfielder, playing more of a defensive role.
Yep.
And so it was great because I got to play on the best player, best midfielder certainly in each of the teams. So playing on Shane Crawford, Matthew Knights, players like that. And back then, of course, they hadn't worked out that you could do interchange and have players go on and off the field. Yep. So I remember, you'd line up next to Shane Crawford before the first bounce of the game, and you knew that you had to basically run for 120 minutes and keep up.
Yeah.
And he was one of the fittest ones. So yeah, it was a different style of game back then. So yeah, you used to really run yourself into the ground. In most games, you used to be exhausted by the end of the game.
So you talked about obviously playing at the MCG. You would have played a few games at Victoria Park.
Yep, we did. So we didn't play lots. We played more the interstate teams.
Yep.
I remember, one of my first games at Vic Park was against the Fremantle Dockers because in '95 that was their first year they came into the comp.
Yep.
So I remember playing the Dockers there, and so that match I got my first goal in the AFL, so that was great. Doing it in front of Vic Park, in front of the crowd, and
they would have loved it.
It's about they did, and it's about a 20,000 stadium capacity, so a bit bigger than the Sandford grounds, but sort of on that sort of level. But of course, everyone's packed in. It's a lot of standing room only, and really, really interesting ground. Of course, everyone complains of going to Vic Park. They used to go, we always go there and there's cold showers and all that. And I used to say, well, we used to have cold showers too, because the hot water didn't work. And we had Damien Monkhurst. He, of course, was our ruckman, but he was also a plumber. So he used to be, he used to try to get the hot water going in the club, and didn't really have much luck, actually.
And so your time at Collingwood, unfortunately, there's certainly no finals. And how hard was that sort of thing that, not a huge amount of wins at a big club, obviously pressure and that side of things? Go through the trials and tribulations there, Pato.
Yeah, well, I suppose, we didn't play finals when I was there, that's a major disappointment, because basically at Norwood you're so used to playing finals, and Collingwood's the same. And it's just, I suppose, the way the way the club sort of, during the late 90s, of course, they had their premiership side from the 90s, and like with list management these days, you sort of have your ebbs and flows. And so, those premiership players from 1990, they were coming to their end of their careers, a number of them, or had finished by 95. And then, of course, the sort of the young guys in the premiership team were sort of the more established ones. And so, again, because the draft was so new, maybe some clubs worked out how to do the draft better than others. I mean, you wouldn't say we went through a period where we drafted lots of 18-year-olds at that stage. And so, there was it took us, we were in that bad position where you're finishing between 9th and 12th sort of. Yeah. And so you're not getting great draft picks, but then you're just missing out. And so, that was sort of where we found ourselves, which was, it's obviously disappointing. That would have been, obviously a much better sort of way to play if you played in finals, of course.
So arriving at Collingwood, the same time with Burnsy, as you said, living with Beefy. So there was a bit of a Nord. It was a great, and James Wasley, trying to think who else. So it was certainly Bart was there for a year. So it was a real Nord link. And so those Nord friendships sort of stayed on forever in your Nord Collingwood side of thing.
Yeah, and we also had Tony Francis and Craig Kelly, who were over there. They were obviously premiership players, and they were a bit older than me, so I hadn't played with them at Norwood.
Yep.
But so like I said, I lived with Burnsy and Brett, and it was great. It was a good way to find your way around a new city, make good friendships. Yeah, and still catch up with them, definitely.
So you got to give us some dirt on the boys that you were living with. Who was the best cook?
Not me, actually. I've got a tip for. If you don't want to ever do cooking, I think they got me to cook one time. I think it was pretty basic dinner, and I made a mess of it, actually, and it was such a mess that I think Brett phoned up his mum to see, is that actually a way to cook things? And I think she said, no, you're not meant to cook things like that. So anyway, I was never allowed to cook.
I can imagine that phone call to Beefy's mum too, actually, yeah. Yes.
I was never allowed to cook, so it's a good way if you want to get out of cooking.
Yeah, good idea.
If you make a real meal of the first one, then they don't let you cook ever again. So, but I mean, they were obviously country boys, and so we used to live off every set, big steak one day, pasta the next, steak, pasta, so just intermittent. But it was great. So I actually put on a fair bit of weight living with those boys. So should have lived with them earlier.
Who was the tidiest? Who was the messiest?
Oh, I would have probably been the messiest. They would say I was the messiest, but I think we weren't too bad, really, for considering, we had the house to ourselves. I'd say I'll give us a gold star.
So your first year, 95, you played under the great man Lee Matthews in 95, and then Tony Shaw, and only the one game under Grumpy Mick in his first year in 2000. Pato.
It was interesting, of course. So. Yeah, we had Lee Matthews, and he coached, I think it was the 10th year he'd been coach at Collingwood. So he was just, I suppose, unfortunately, he's coming to his end. But when you look back at that year, like we lost quite a few games early, and we should have played finals in the end. We only had to win one of our last 2 games. And, he really sort of kept us in the final. So, like, in terms of coaching, he obviously was a very good coach, and he was just trying to work his way through. I mean, at that stage, he hadn't done media, and I think he did a stint of media after being at Collingwood and then went off and coached Brisbane, and that probably helped his interpersonal skills a lot, which is what the modern-day players love, because he was, when he was at Collingwood, he was, really, really harsh, the old style coach, I suppose. And I remember him really having a crack at training one time for I made a mistake, and Shane Kerrison came over and he goes, "Oh, don't actually worry about it. I mean, at least he's yelling at you. He's not yelling at me anymore because I'm past it." So
fair way of looking at it.
Yeah, that is a good way of looking at it.
So he was an excellent coach, and then we had Tony Shaw, who he went straight from basically playing, did a year as reserves coach, and then, straight into league. And he was probably a little bit ahead of his time in terms of he had lots of set plays and tried to bring professionalism into it. And in fact, we were, as I said, when I first went over there, it was semi-professional. And then about halfway through in '98, he basically it was able to become professional because the AFL got a TV rights deal, and that's when Andrew Demetrio was the CEO, and he basically said, okay, because we've got that money coming from the TV rights, we can start playing the players properly, and really what made it professional is when he said, well, we'll play the reserves players who might never play a game, we'll still pay them, effectively the average wage at the time, so that then, once they did that, the coaches started saying, well, now, you're getting paid the average wage here, so you don't need to work anymore. So all of a sudden, we started training during the daytime as opposed to, 4 o'clock at night. And, the one thing I noticed going to Victoria compared to SA, definitely training at winter in Victoria is a lot colder at night time than it is over here in SA. And you get all tighter and things like that. Your training's not as good because your body's not as loose. So being able to move into the daytime was a big thing. I think we even had the TV cameras roll up because it was such a new thing. They wanted to see what's going on. What does it look like, this professional football? And of course, at that stage, they were just trying to work out what it was. So it was really just doing weights and having a bit of a run and then doing a training session. Whereas now there's so much more to it.
Of course, you played with a couple of the greats, Collingwood greats, and great players in general in Gavin Brown and Nathan Buckley too, mate.
Well, I did, yeah. They were excellent players. So, I was number 6, Buckley was number 5. So Bucks was basically next door as my locker buddy. And the first year, Dermot Burden played as well for a year, which was great. Yeah. He was number 3. So, I mean, I had these legends of the game. I had Dermot Burden, Gary Pert, Buckley next to myself. So that was great. Great way to sort of get introduced to the game. But Bucks was an excellent player. I think Mick McGuan also was he was very injured, unfortunately. Yeah. But whenever he played, he was a really good team player, and I think our team was a lot better whenever Mick McGuan played. But unfortunately, he just had a lot of groin issues and hammy issues, and so didn't get on the park very much.
Was Bucks as professional as he looks each and every game, and even on the TV at the moment, he looks like he's well and truly prepared?
Oh, yeah, no, he was he was great fun, but yeah, he was definitely very professional. He really tried to get the best out of himself. He trained hard. So very professional. And always, trying to, at trainings and that, getting ready for games. And even if he was injured, he'd really push it to get back in, recover as well. Like with his recovery, he's really good like that.
Did you guys come across each other in the SNFL?
Yeah. Well, we played, I played against him. I didn't know at the time, but when I was playing under 19s, I think, we worked out we would have played against each other when he was at Port. And then in 92, when he had his outstanding year for the Magpies, I played against him there.
Yeah, he dominated 92.
Did he ever?
So obviously with Sav Rocker as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, Sav was great because, he was the full forward. This is back when you used to actually be running down the wing and, have a few bounces and be able to kick 50 metres forward and hit a target, as opposed to running down the wing these days and having to kick it backwards because your full forwards run down to full back to defend. So he was just a massive unit.
Yeah.
And, you could put it anywhere near him and he'd win more one-on-one contests than he'd lose. I mean, I remember playing Essendon a number of times, and he had some great Anzac Day games where he just dominated the game and could kick an absolute mile as well.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
He was actually better. It was better him having a kick for goal from 55 metres than from 15. Like he just kicked so true from 55. They would just go very straight. But he'd get close to goals and he'd just sort of like stab at it and miss them, unfortunately.
Reminds me
Not all the time.
Reminds me of a current Adelaide player playing his 250th this weekend.
Yeah,
He's very much like that as well.
He can do that at times, Tex. Yep.
That's a bit harsh. I think Tex is a magnificent kick.
Yeah,
I agree, but there's
times.
That 30 metres out sometimes you worry, but then it's 50 out, you almost back him every time.
Yeah, he does kick through.
Yes.
Yeah, he always has. Bit of frustration not playing 100 games for the Pies, Pato?
Oh, yeah, of course. So, I mean, but of course, my frustration is they never counted the Ansett Cup games. Whereas in the Sandful, they counted the Escort
that's true.
Cup
They
games.
did too.
My SA games has probably boosted a little bit because of the pre-season games.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they don't count those games. So if they did, I would have clocked over the 100. But yeah, that's that'd be great to tick off. But I mean, it didn't happen, as you said. I played one game in my last season when Mick Malthouse was a coach, and that's the disappointing thing there is that just it wasn't because of injury. It's just getting on a little bit. It would have been good to be a young player coming with a new coach. He came in to coach, and we were towards the bottom of the ladder, and his job was to try to play young players to give them games and get the team to improve. And so he you could really tell he had a really for a good game style and understood the what was required from a coach who came from West Coast, of course, which were in the 90s were an excellent team. And he was really he brought something different. Lots of physicality as well, of course.
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier on, obviously playing in the Anzac Day clashes. You mentioned that running out for a normal game, the crowd sort of blew you off your feet, but the Anzac Day, that's on everyone's bucket list to do. I'm assuming it's one thing that you're privileged to be a part of?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And, I mean, these days, the pre-game ceremony is, it's a work of art, really, how they do it. They've got a catapult party and things like that. We didn't have that extreme because they were just working their way through it. But I remember because it was so, these were the first Anzac Day games. So usually you'd get the diggers they'd gone off to the Anzac Day, the dawn service, and then they'd go for the march in the city. They probably stopped at the RSL to have a few runs while they waited for the footy, and then they'd get some of the veterans would come out onto the ground, and we'd be lined up waiting for them. And the veterans had probably had one or two many runs, so they were like, it was meant to be the minute of silence, and they were off like getting all excited, going, "Come on, Collingwood," barracking like that. And the other thing, of course, is, you've got the minute silence now, and then they have the bugler comes on. And, of course, everyone's seen on TV so much or gone to the game. They know, to be silent the whole time. But back then, of course, no one knew. So you'd always get someone, they'd go a bit early before the lap. And they'd cheer out, then they had to be quiet. But so there's that real buzz before the game. And then you'd feel bulletproof, but when the first bounce comes on, they were really intense games, the first quarter, absolutely.
And then you finished up, you ended up coming back to Norwood for one last year, 2002.
Yes. Yeah, so that's Macca was the coach. That was his first year of coaching. Yeah, so, I wanted to stay over in Melbourne for a bit just because I wanted to, not rush back to Adelaide when I finished in the AFL, because I'd seen quite a few of the teammates over there. They got homesick the whole time, and then once they retired, they'd go back interstate, and then they'd find that everyone else had moved on, and they ended up coming back. So I spent a year over in Melbourne after I finished the AFL, and just worked there. Worked at Champion Data actually.
Okay.
And then just got itchy feet really, and thought, no, I wouldn't mind playing again. And yeah, Macca was the coach, so yeah, came back over and played at Norwood. Yeah, had high hopes of at least playing 100 games at Norwood. But yeah, the body. It's funny having a year off. It didn't really affect my fitness, but it just your body isn't used to the
knocks,
the knocks and that. And so I did really little niggly injuries, but little hamstrings and things like that. Not badly, but enough to always make you miss a week or two and not be able to train properly. So yeah, it was probably my most frustrating year, to be honest.
And then after footy, work-wise, when did you go into part? So you work with our previous guest on our show, and with the great man, with Justin Bart Staritsky. You two went into business together for a fair while.
Yes, yep, yeah, and also Anthony Harvey as well.
Sir Anthony, yes,
yes, Sir Anthony, yeah, and yeah, like I said, I'd worked at Champion Data, so I was and being an electrical engineer and done some work with computers and the internet, was really keen on, setting up a business. When you're playing AFL, you fly interstate and you see all these business people having the Friday off and flying over with you and, playing golf and that. And so I thought, oh, well, that's the life. Wouldn't mind running a business and be able to have Fridays off. And little did I know, of course, when you run a business, you actually work doubly hard. So that never eventuated. But, yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it's a great thing, running your own business. It's certainly, you really get to be hands-on and can set your own path.
And then, Pato, fascinatingly, what made you originally run for local council? It's an interesting part of your life here. Yeah,
well, I was trying to, of course, I had finished playing football, but wanted to keep fit. And, we had, had young family at that stage. We just moved down to Glenelg. So, came back to Adelaide, ended up buying a house down in Glenelg South. And being near the beach, never lived near the beach before, but wanted to get the kids to be, surf smart. So we joined up with the Glenelg Surf Lifesaving Club. They did the Nippers, went out to that. And then out of that, of course, we thought, well, why don't we do the Bronze Medallion? Because then we can volunteer and do volunteer life-saving patrols on the beach as well.
Yep.
So really sort of got into that, and it's excellent. Life-saving is a great sport to do because you've got males and females and all ages as well. So you've got, from juniors through to adults through to, people that are what they call masters now, so a bit older. But, there's lots of interaction and there's lots of mentors and people looking out for each other. So I really got involved from a community point of view with community sport and same with football. And, with the local council, really saw an opportunity there, where, at a community level. I was really interested in, I suppose, because councils really work quite closely with their local community clubs. So just thought, well, I'll give it a go.
And, of course, you ended up then running against Ken Rowland and becoming the mayor of the city of Holdfast Bay in 2014.
Yeah. Well, obviously running your own business and, having, I suppose, that background, I sort of got, I was getting frustrated, I suppose, with what was going on with the council and thought, well, rather than just sit there and say nothing, I'll put myself out there and, ran for mayor. And, that was probably a bit of timing as well. Ken had been the mayor for many years. And so, it was actually probably a bit of timing and also bringing maybe a different perspective as well, which people, supported, which was good. I mean, it was hard, of course, because Ken had delivered every second person in Glenelg and the whole area. So, everyone I talked to, they go, oh, well, Ken delivered my children or they delivered me. So, I didn't really have that up my sleeve. So,
you should have lifted your game, Pato.
Need to kiss a lot of babies now, mate.
And then,
but that was great.
What got you then deciding to go to the next level? What?
Well, I suppose, like I said, I was really interested in trying to, I suppose, look at growing the economy down in the Holdfast Bay area, which is the council I was mayor of down at Glenelg and Brighton. That was one of the focus. And, there's a big tourism, I suppose, bit of a tourism element there, but there's also other elements. And what I quickly realised is, of course, you can, with a council, your boundaries are quite small, and, you probably, if you're going to be true to community, you really should be focused on your, on just, trying to do things specifically for your council. I just found myself looking at, what was required and thinking, well, really, that's not a council issue. That's actually more of a state government issue and things there, because that affects the whole state. And, rather than just trying to think, well, there's this little island called Holdfast Bay that's independent of everyone else. And I, have always, always been liberal, and thought, well, why not put myself forward, to represent the Liberal Party in that area, which is what happened.
You've certainly run at a few different portfolios and that over the time, Pato. Go through sort of like quickly some of the best bits and the trials and successes in that regard.
Yeah, so I was elected in 2018, so I've been now in state parliament for 5 years. And so you started off as a backbencher. So the 2018 election, the Liberal government was elected. And because of my background, though, having a small business but running, I've got experience, I suppose, in a number of fields such as space, defence, and also, high tech. So to start off with, Premier Marshall, he was a good friend of Norwood Footy Club. He got me involved in sort of learning the ropes from him. He was the Minister for Space and Defence Industry. So quite often he'd get me to come along to meetings, come along to, I suppose, events as well, just to learn the ropes and to meet people and get involved. And then in 2020, COVID had just started, but I was lucky to be made Minister for Trade and Investment back in July 2020. And, if you look at some of the areas where the state's trying to focus on, it was trying to grow the economy and grow investment in areas such as space, defence, but also in renewable energy as well, which I have a bit of a background and knowledge of from my electrical engineering studies. So that was really interesting. What was challenging, though, is within 2 weeks of becoming Minister for Trade and Investment, China went and put a massive tariff ban, well, not a ban, but just a massive tariff hike onto wine, which effectively closed the market off for China for our wine producers here in SA. So that was just a massive issue. And of course, at the same time, there's COVID going on, so there's no international travel, which makes it really hard for to strike up new trade countries for the wine. So really, it was looking at relying on established relationships in other countries, and then gradually trying to move into new markets as well. And so that was a lot of hard yards for the whole time I was Minister for Trade and Investment, because those tariffs, they're still there, unfortunately. I mean, there's movement maybe at the station now, but certainly at the time, the market was effectively closed to Australian wine. And so that'd be the tribulations, but certainly there was some, great times as well. So I think one of the highlights was when the Australian Space Agency was announced that it was going to be in Adelaide. That's great for the state in terms of being able to set up a space industry here in SA. And people go, "Oh, that's space. That's for people that nerds that are off doing lots of university." But what it does is it brings all these, I suppose, problem solvers, because to go up into space is solving lots of problem solvers and entrepreneurial people, and they'll find solutions to other problems as well. So it's about trying to really grow people and give people a reason to live here in South Australia, rather than what was happening a lot of the time was people were leaving and going either interstate or overseas.
Did you find that your time in football certainly helped with your, not personally as far as popularity goes, but some of the moving interstate and playing interstate and learning new things over in Melbourne and then coming back to Adelaide? Do you think that helped a little bit with your political stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, because it just gives you obviously another how other people live. I think it's really important to do that actually, rather than just thinking everyone, in Australia, let alone the world, thinks the same as South Australians.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other great thing about football, it obviously teaches you teamwork, and it teaches you to be able to understand people from all walks of life. Because I mean, a football team is made up from all walks of life. I remember, we'd have doctors playing. We'd have, Macca was pretty hands-on. He was a bricklayer. You'd have plumbers, and you get to know all sorts of people. And quite often I found myself able to form great friendships with knockabout blokes, really. And just sort of really get to understand people. I think that really helps as well. I can talk to most people, whether they're the rich and famous and the high, Neil Craig used to call them Kenny Cashflow. So they're the big sponsors and the people with all the, at the top end of society, right down to the, with all footy clubs, they've got, supporters who basically they spend every dollar at the club, so to speak. It's not like they're rolling in money, but they just love the club so much, and they're around there too. So you get, as I said, speak to all walks of life.
On the political side of things, Pato, the difference between being a sitting member and in opposition, how does that, how does that work, and change your job up, etc.?
Yeah, well, people, now, in opposition, people say, oh, you must have lots of time on your hands, so you've got no extra time, probably less time. It's just that you allocate your time differently. So when obviously in government you've got the whole public service, not behind each politician directly, but you've got that support there. When you're in opposition, you really have you run on the what is it, the smell of an oily rag, basically. So there's a lot more hands on. You're not when you're in government, you're controlling the levers of power. So you've got to you're steering the ship, which is I think all people, certainly the whole point of getting into politics is to make a difference to the people's in your community's life, but also to the state. So that's when you're running it, there's a great responsibility, but it also gives you a bit more control.
Do the parties work together enough? Is there enough common sense in that regard, and has it improved,
especially from a sporting point of view?
Well, I mean
overall.
I mean, if you look at sport, it's the same thing. When you're on the field, it's you cross the white line and it's very competitive, and then off the field, you can have relationships. It's a bit like that. Yep. You'd say in politics as well. I mean, people always say, like, when you see the committees running, so these are the institutions not sitting in Parliament, in the House of Assembly, but having these committees that feed into decision making, they're a bit more collaborative, definitely. But there's always room for improvement, sure.
Yeah. And of course, you've got a daughter now playing at Glenelg, and I may have commentated a game and watched Violet that played in a few weeks ago, and Violet had played pretty well, and I thought, I reckon she'll get a club award, and we commentate right next to the coaching box, so I was pretty confident that Violet was. So I wandered downstairs, and I've walked up to her and gone, "Well done, Violet," and you've had more tackles today than the old man did in his entire career. And I reckon she's thinking, I'm not really sure how to take this guy.
No, she probably did it. She's stranger danger, but she certainly. She loved the quote. She told me afterwards. She thought that was hilarious, and it's probably true, to be honest. Certainly at Norwood, we were quite an attacking team. We did not so much tackles there, but yeah, she loves it. I mean,
she has a crack.
She does. She's got big brothers, so she's used to getting, roughed up a little bit. So she actually enjoys that, and she's all very self-driven too. People think, oh, well, did you sort of get her into it? But her school, they had Daniel Kerr, who played at Westies. He was one of the teachers at school, and he basically grabbed the girls and they did training sessions at school, and they were, really, taught them the basic skills, and Violet loved it. So she went out, played at Plympton Bulldogs, and it's really interesting. Like, the girls' sport's it's come from a long way. It's got a long way to go, but she was training just the local Plympton Bulldogs, and there's 5 girls teams training, for an hour a night, and they'd play on the weekend. So they're not doing much training, and you know, they're starting as under 12s, not as under 8. So,
yeah.
you know, they haven't had as many skill development sessions, and, you know, they never got to do full ground drills and learn how to kick. And so she's played at Plympton and then just went out to the Glenelg under 16s and did really well sort of I suppose, just in a term 3 holidays, and then got invited out to the train with the seniors because the Sandford W expanded to have like effectively their development league. So you've got the seniors girls teams and effectively the development reserves, team sits underneath it, reserves. So she got invited out of that, and just in pre-season ended up playing seniors all year. That was last season. And it was great, and just because she was able to develop her skills so quickly, and that's what's so good for the girls. They, you know, once they get into these, you know, I suppose environments where they get to learn the skills, they really can come on in leaps and bounds. And, you know, girls, people keep saying, you know, I've talked to the coaches and they say they're just different to boys, how they train, because they, you know, they want to lap up everything and learn everything, and probably like in school, the girls probably listen a little bit more. And not distracted as much as the boys. So they, you know, they're like sponges, and they suck up all the different skill training drills and come along in leaps and bounds.
Did you ever think that we would see that the women's game has taken off the way it has?
No, it's been really good. I think the best thing the AFL did probably was to align each of the girls teams with the clubs, as opposed to having a girls competition, but it was, you know, with teams that weren't aligned with AFL clubs, because instantly you got like a ready-made supporter base, and you've got the club infrastructure there, and I think that's been great. And then that's filtered down, getting it on TV, and then the girls, you know, are watching it and want to replicate it. And, you know, in the Sandford W, I think the great thing at Glenelg is, I remember back when I was mayor and Glenn Elliott was the CEO of Glenelg, you know, the footy club was financially in a bit of trouble. They had to do, you know, they had to basically run a, I can't remember, I think Save the Tigers. Trying to get that going. Had, you know, greats like Nick Chigwin was the president, and Peter Carey. You know, they were having to really fight for their survival, just to be able to reach their centenary year. But Glenn Elliott said, well, the Sandford's putting in a women's competition, and we're going to be one of the clubs that puts in a team. So that was great. So Glenelg's, you know, really supported the girls program a lot, and, you know, they train with, you know, they've got a good I suppose they work, you know, train together with the boys in terms of like they, you know, value them equally. They'll, you know, I think they have leadership courses that both the men and women's teams go to. So it's not like they're two separate teams within a club.
Oh, and Violet's now got a path
on that.
She's got a pathway. You're right.
Violet's got a pathway to aim for, and she is focused. You can see that from just chatting to her for a little bit. And so good luck, well and truly.
If she gets drafted, has she sort of hinted where she might want to play?
Not really. Like, I think the interesting thing is, like, with father-son, when I retired, when father-son, it was 50 games, and then they changed it to 100 games. So, you know.
Yeah, but no, daughter-wise, I think it's just straight one game. So I would say that Violet would qualify for Collingwood, I would think.
So there you go.
Yeah.
But would she qualify for the Crows being under the SNFL?
No, I think it'd be Collingwood.
Okay. I would have thought Collingwood as well.
And considering they're coached too by Steve Simons, good Nord man. So never know there on that one, Pato.
Yes. No. Well, I'll leave that with her. Like I said, she's driven that herself.
Yeah.
She's pretty. Like you said, pretty determined.
Yeah.
But she loves it, and, you know, it's great actually. Like I remember, you know, when you play juniors, some of the best footy you play with, because you're sort of. You're all sort of working towards the one goal, and, you know, team success, and you know, you're enjoying mucking around with each other. So there's a good group of juniors there at Glenelg, certainly probably in all the clubs. But she's loving it.
Earlier this year, so Violet's playing, and I was sitting with Pato and at a game, and Violet may have stuffed up a kick a little bit, and
it happens.
I've gone, well, hopefully the mum's a good kick, because we're not going to get that from the old man. And so your wife pissed herself laughing on that one. She quite enjoyed that line. So Yes.
There's always banter. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, got to have some fun in sport and in life. Hey, Pato, greatly appreciated, mate. I'm sure that we'll catch up over the next time and all that. And obviously following your career in politics, and certainly follow Violet along, and all the best. Greatly appreciated, Pato.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you, mate. I know your time's limited, and thank you for giving it to us tonight. And thoroughly enjoyed watching your career, and obviously in politics. Wishing you the best of luck.
No, thanks so much.
Thanks, mate.
Good stuff. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pato. Thanks, mate.